What's the difference between a lentil and a chickpea? You've had to hear this before. I've never had a lentil on my face before.
What's the difference between a lentil and a chickpea?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's terrible is I'm gonna laugh at these. They're not funny, and I'm gonna laugh at them.
No, but that's a joke, man. So, did you write those jokes?
No. Well, I'd like to take credit for some of them, but really, I read them before. I've heard some people say them, and then I'll like tweak them to kind of like so I could say them comfortably out of my mouth, or they sound more normal coming out of my mouth.
You made them your own.
So a little bit. I've sort of done the right thing with them, but also there's some that I've just written down because I find them like I say them and I know they're stupid, but it doesn't matter. I can't stop laughing after I say them.
It's so weird because like as a comedian now, I had no idea how jokes were written as a kid. I truly thought they were like passed down with the Bible. Like, because that's like the oldest story and the oldest book I knew. Like, I thought that like jokes were just part of Earth. Like, thinking as a kid what a joke is, like what you just said, is like like it was so insane to me. And when I started doing stand up, I was like, this is like it's so weird to think like what is a joke? You know,
it honestly, it's one of the most beautiful things in the world for me. Whenever I think, and I'm sure you would agree, but when you're a kid, there are some jokes that are just a fixture of conversation. Some people's families are into them. There's 100 dad jokes in the world that my dad will whip out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
They're not even jokes. They're literally just, he's like speaking in prose, right, about how shitty something is or complaining or whatever. And it turns out to be a joke. And then there's other jokes like comedians will use the premise for and insert their life shit into it, and it turns into their own, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you could just have a very advanced form of storytelling, and it comes out as super entertaining. I mean, there's the one word is that the heckling, someone who heckles a comedian, I don't come to your job and take the dick out of your mouth or whatever. There's a couple of those jokes that like it doesn't matter how old it is or when it is. It's like people get why they're said. It's generally accepted as funny. And then once the comedian or entertainer inserts the real life stuff into it, what has to do with their life, then it starts to become a story, becomes real. I could see the imagery happens, you know.
It's also like that had to have started from somewhere. You know, the I don't come to your job thing. Like you got to think like there was a comedian at some point that was the first person to do that.
Right.
Right? And that's the thing where I'm like on the fence with what I think is hack, and this is very controversial in the comedy world because like to me, music is hack. Okay? Lyrics are the top 10 songs, 20 songs are probably like love songs or songs that have to do with the same subjects, right? But if you have 10 comedians talking about the same thing, it's now hack. But in music, maybe like in deep music, it's considered hack to have a song like a love song or whatever. But I don't think that a comedian, I'm Italian, you know, you're Italian, we probably grew up similar ways to some point. So if we were to both do stand-up, we would be considered possibly hack by some comics as we grew up Italian and talking about being Italian.
I think about this all the time, especially when it has something to do with like a creative music, art, comedy, whatever. We are always going to take from what we know as home or comfortable or what we can relate the most to. I mean, both of our moms make sauce.
Yeah.
I think, you know, the idea of this whole thing comes from a rooted place for both of us, that I wake up on a Sunday morning and I smell sauce in my house.
Yeah, that's a real thing.
Most of the jokes come from that area of my life. Family, friends around a table eating. Both my parents are cooks. All the kitchen humor. I grew up with all that. You know, I love I love taking from that world, because really that's where the individualism comes from. No one grew up the same. We could both be Italian, but we still have different nuances to what makes us who we are.
100%. And like kitchen humor, I didn't like. There wasn't as many kitchen jokes. It was more like construction jokes, you know? And that's a very specific audience. So I think like the difference is like knowing your crowd to a certain point, where if you walk on a construction site, it's going to be a lot of like, oh, look at this guy eating a banana, you know, like those type of jokes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can't do that to anybody, because the audience isn't going to fully be on board, or it's going to be too this and that. And it's like, yeah, there's a point where you don't want to have to filter yourself. You know, like the construction jokes themselves are for a certain audience. And it's one of those things where we need to, as a comedian, you need to have your voice, or you need to know what your voice is, and be true to that voice in a sense. But not everybody at the beginning will know what their voice is. And I think one of the benefits of starting as an older person doing stand-up specifically is that you kind of know yourself more, and you can see a young comic, in my mind, because they pretty much just talk about jerking off or living in their parents' basement. And it's not a bad thing if that's what you're dealing with at that point in time. But it's like, really, there's a lot of like new comics when you go to like open mics or whatever, and that's what they're focusing on. And it really is going back to the whole like hack thing. Like, where I get mad about it is on more the internet, because people are like creating personas and they're not those people, right? Like, and that to me is hack. Is like, you're now listening to a comedian and creating a video based off their joke.
Oh, the poser will always be hack. It'll always be that. You bring up an interesting point. I thought a lot about this before we even met. During the pandemic, I got super, super into comedy and podcasts in general.
Yeah.
I never actually thought I'd ever want to start one, or have anyone that would want to start one with me. I was literally just kind of doing some research on how are these comedians pivoting with the pandemic. I know for me as a musician, it was really, really hard. It was very hard for me. You know, I toured all over the world for a long time. All those medium to large tier acts slowly started falling off during the pandemic. Ticket sales are down. Yeah. Everything was difficult. So a lot of us were transferring stuff to online. How can I show people that I produce music? How can I show people that I make beats, or get my stuff out to TV shows that need music? You know, a lot of it's like live streaming or Twitch stream. I saw the comedy world pivot big time into these podcasts. I mean, it changed literally. Shout out to the GOATs, Bobby Lee, Andrew Santino, Andrew Schultz, all the guys that really took the time to pivot their life and kind of bring the funny right into the home. I mean, you see it happening. They say it out loud on the podcast every day. A direct result from podcasting and reaching the consumer and the customer in the home is directly related to the ticket sales now that the pandemic is, you know, coming to an end and people are starting to go see stuff live again. People are coming out to see them again because of the awareness of their podcast.
Well, the pandemic is really the perfect thing for a comedian, right? Because like, either than comedians not wanting to be alone or whatever, you're by yourself on stage, right? You have a microphone and an audience. So going into the pandemic or lockdown of any sort, it really is like a perfect platform for any performer who just has a microphone, because like, you're like, hey, I can, instead of talking on the stage, I can just talk into a microphone and put it out there. And you know, you touring before the lockdown and all that stuff, I wasn't like touring the world as a comedian. I was living in Los Angeles, and I every day regret not going into lockdown with a already running podcast, because it's nothing. Literally, it's you needed nothing to do it, and I am 100% accountable for being lazy to not having the energy to like go into a lockdown scenario, because we will never see that concentrated eyes on social media again.
That's for sure.
Unless there's another lockdown. You know, like really everyone was at home for that 9 months or whatever it was, straight up glued to their phones.
You know, it's funny, man. I moved home probably a year into the pandemic. You know, stuff got crazy in New York City. My family's here. Everyone was kind of going back to family. And during that time, I was like, what's the next step here? What's the next creative step? My life thrives on this creative journey. I've been a musician since before I could remember. And really, I need to give a huge shout out to Jake Bauer. Had this crazy idea to start this little comedy show out here. We called it the Bubble Box Comedy Show. He started an art studio, named it the Lip Face Art Studio.
Yeah.
And, you know, he brought Mark and I together. He wanted someone to do music for this show that he thought of. Someone with the most experience in that realm that Jake knew at the time was Mark.
Yeah.
I was talking to Jake about doing music for the show, and he kind of just brought us together for a meeting. We learned a little bit about each other in that meeting, and then I did a little bit of my own research on Mark. I kind of did a deep dive on his YouTube. There's some hilarious shit out there.
All right, next to the mic, Mark DeBonis.
All right, how's everybody doing? All right, I know nothing about politics, all right? Like, I'm not even gonna lie. I didn't vote. I don't know who the governor or prime minister or whatever they do in Toronto is, all right? But what I do know is when something works, use it, you know? Like, hip-hop, for example, there's this video, A Milli, by Lil Wayne, okay? And in the video, all he does is walk. It's like one scene, all he does is walk the whole time, all right? Now, in the club, when they play this song, everyone just walks in lines, all right? They just walk like this. This is all they do, all right? Now, if you have the power to make somebody to walk in a club or people trained to dance for, you should be doing big things with your life, all right? I was in No Frills the other day, and I hear this guy, he's like, Mark DeBonis. I'm like, yeah, what's up? He's like, huh? Come on. And I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm sorry. He's like, Montessori school? Huh? I'm like, what the fuck is Montessori school? For people who don't know, it is school you go to before junior kindergarten, all right? Now, I must have grown at least 6 feet since then, and how this guy remembers my name and knows what I look like amazes me, okay? And like, what am I supposed to talk about with this guy? So, you still shit your pants or something? Like, I got nothing to say, you know? And then, I don't like small talk, you know? But I reached a new low of small talk the other day. It's spite small talk. I don't know if you guys have done this. It's when you see somebody that you don't want to talk to, so you try and avoid them, but then you see them avoiding you. And then you're like, no, I do the avoiding, all right? You're like, hey, what's going on? How's life? I don't care. I'm getting the last word all the time, all right? Oh, man. Being from Scarborough, growing up in Scarborough, taking the bus and stuff, you know, you see a lot of fights on the bus, guns, knives, and it doesn't faze people anymore, all right? But have you guys ever seen a bee on the bus? It's just, everyone's sitting there and they're watching the bee and they're like, don't get it mad, it might come over, you know? And I thought about it, I'm like, technically, like, the bees are the terrorists of the insect world, you know? Because they only get one shot and they're done. They're like the suicide bombers. Like, I don't know if, like, the bee king is like, yeah, in your next life you come back as a butterfly. Or if there's like 40 flowers to get depollined or something, you know? I don't know, but it messes me up sometimes. I hate bees. I've come to terms with the fact that in my past life, I was a drug dealer who died on a drug overdose, and I'm getting the effects now. Because I do not do drugs at all. Like, people thought I'd been high my whole life. I don't do drugs. I smoked weed 1 week and then I'm making traps and falling into them the whole time. It was horrible. Like, all I'm saying is don't do drugs. Your next life might get affected by it, you know? I wish I could have had like a cool problem, like attracting babes or something all the time, you know? But I don't got that. Like, I know you guys like, this guy's a huge babe magnet, but really, I'm not, all right? My only pickup line is, so do you like to party or what? All right? And if she doesn't like to party, it goes nowhere fast. You know, it's just done. So for me to go pick up a girl, I gotta drink a couple beers, you know, try and get comfortable or whatever. But the thing is, when you drink, guys know it's a scientific fact that you can't perform all the time at night, you know, when you drink something. Now, also, it's another scientific fact that when a man is nervous, his penis shrinks. Okay, this is just, I know guys are like, man, mine gets bigger. No, it's in the books, it gets smaller, all right? Now, I'm not a doctor or anything, but do you know what happens to the female vagina when she's drunk and nervous? Nothing at all. Nothing. It's not like a piece of skin comes over her vagina and she's like, Becky, I can't go home with him tonight. I have no vagina until tomorrow. That doesn't work. All right, so start picking up guys, girls. All right, oh man. So my mom is really paranoid. You know, she's really paranoid, and it's coming into my life now. And I know that I smoke. I have the possibility of losing my voice in the future. So I had this idea about making something like a voice will, where I can record my voice and have it on stock, so I don't have to sound like a robot when I lose my voice. So I walk around with this tape recorder now, just in case I lose my voice. I'll give you guys a couple examples of everyday sayings, all right?
Hello, I'm DeBonis. How are you? It's good to meet you. No, I knew you, boy. Hey, buddy, what's going on? So, you like to party?
All right, guys, thank you. I'm DeBonis.
Honestly, just because we're starting this, and I just feel like it should be a normal thing anyways, I want to know more about that in general. Like how you got your start in comedy. What was why did you even get into it? Why do you even care? Why do you want to make people laugh?
To be honest, like, I truly had nothing going on in my life. I was 21 years old, working at a restaurant and doing some light construction on the weekend, like helping my dad. And I dropped out of school. I went to school for digital media arts. I ended up dropping out because like the second year got more detailed with stuff that I wasn't interested in. And I remember there was a program for like, somehow through a series of events, I ended up thinking that I wanted to write for television, but I hated Shakespeare. So I Googled, in Toronto, this was years ago, I Googled writing program with no Shakespeare, because I'm like, I knew enough about myself where if they started going hard on Shakespeare, I'm dropping out.
I'm out.
So I somehow found this program called Comedy Writing and Performing in Toronto, which was like within an hour from my parents' place at the time. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? And I found this program, and they focused on comedy. And I've loved comedy my whole life. It's like I used to watch, like, you know, behind the scenes stuff, director's commentary. I would watch movies and listen to, like, I would watch like Orgasmo with Matt Stone and Trey Parker.
I love Orgasmo.
Yeah, we got to get up. It's not gonna. Okay, yeah.
I remember it was a classic.
Yeah, I would love Orgasmo, and like I would watch that with like the director's commentary. So it was so deep in my life, but like I said, I didn't know that you can just do comedy. And I'm like, what is this? And I found this program, and I guess we can get into it. So I had to audition, and I did not want to, I've never performed in my life before. So I didn't want to do the actual audition part, but they were like, you need to, or you're not gonna make the cut, right?
We all got auditions sometimes.
Yeah, but I had no point. Like, I never in my life wanted to be a performer. I wanted to be a writer.
So this is like a part of it that was scary. Like, I don't know anything
scary,
about this.
yeah.
Yeah, like you. It's funny when you get introduced to something that excites you, right? Maybe you saw a comedian, or you're watching a movie, and you're like, this is the coolest shit, right? Maybe I want to do this, but I have no idea what the hell this means.
I hated stand-up.
Okay, yeah,
Like,
this is what I'm talking about.
Like, I truly, at that point, have never watched more than 30 seconds of stand-up comedy in my life. Like, when I was a kid, I would scroll through the TV, and I would see a comedian, and I would see the audience laughing, and I'd be like, these people are idiots. Why are all these people listening to one person? But, like, Saturday Night Live, I loved, like I loved watching Saturday Night Live as
the sketches,
a kid.
the written sketches,
It
the
just
jokes. Yeah,
seemed different, but I had no idea the influences stand-up had in my life. Like, Simpsons was all comedians on the show, right? Like, I never even saw George Carlin, but I used to watch Shining Time Station as a kid.
Oh, that's
which
funny.
had George Carlin on it.
Yeah.
So all this stuff that I watched I had no idea was like secretly influenced by stand-up comedy.
Oh, I love that.
And so I end up going into this audition. I was so on the fence with it, and my roommate at the time just kept pushing me to go. I end up going. I was supposed to do 1 minute of stand-up, one sketch, and like some improv. Which
that's terrifying.
It was insane. Like, and this was the audition process.
Oh my God, dude.
And I remember, like, I go into the room, and it was cliche. Everyone's like farting and rolling around, and I'm like, what the hell's going on here? Like, I'm not used to this type of like energy. And they tried to like get me to do some stuff that I really was not feeling comfortable about. And I end up going into the audition, and when I walk in, there was a table with coffees and a muffin, and like muffins in a coffee, and I pour myself a coffee and I take a muffin, and I walk into the audition. It's all in one room, and there's 4 people sitting there, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what? And they're like, those muffins aren't for you. And I was like, what? And they're like, those are our muffins and coffee. And I'm like, well, why are they at the entrance of the room? Like, I'm walking into a room and I see coffees and a muffin. I'm going to take it, because I'm like, put it on the other side so I know.
Put it in your room.
Yeah, put it on your section,
exactly.
right? Like, and I go to put the muffin back, and they're like, well, you got to take the muffin now. Like, you touched everything. And I'm like, honestly, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm so nervous right now. I just wanted a coffee and a muffin. I did not know that this was not for us. And they were like, okay, like, what's your name? And I say, I'm like, my name's Mark DeBonis. And they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I work at a restaurant. And they're like, do you want to do stand-up? And I said, no. They're like, why are you here? And I'm like, I want to write for a TV. And they're like, why? And I'm like, I truly don't know what series of events brought me here, but this was it. And I did my audition, and I go back into the other room, and everyone's rolling around and farting and all that, or whatever they're doing, and making noises. And I just remember, like, one person was like, you got a muffin? And I was like, yeah, you guys.
Yo, this is hilarious.
And I'm like, yeah, you guys didn't? And I sat there and I drank my coffee and ate my muffin, and everyone just sat down and started thinking about what happened in that room.
It got real.
It got real. And then
that's hilarious.
And then fast forward a bit, I got into the program, and I had to do stand-up, and I really was pushing not to do it. And my teacher was like, look, Mark, if you don't do this, you're going to fail. And I was like, man, like, I really don't want to do it. And I did one night. It was an amateur night, and I did one amateur show, and I had a joke that was like a real-life scenario. But, again, I didn't know what a joke was, and I'm learning about it a bit through this program. And I just told something that happened to me the weekend before. And it does okay. And then my teacher the next day was like, Mark, can you do me a favor? I just want you to do it one more time next week, because
he loved it.
The problem was that scenario was something that happened on Seinfeld, the show. And obviously, like, I've talked already about how I was a big Seinfeld fan. And he's like, do you know that was an episode of Seinfeld? And I'm like, now that you're mentioning it, I know what you mean. But this literally happened to me 72 hours ago.
But he saw something in you to do it again. He was like, I need him again.
And he's like, I'm putting you on next Tuesday. And I went up next Tuesday.
I love that.
And I did a new thing of whatever I thought was a joke. And it was like not ever doing a drug like heroin. I assumed that this was the dragon. Like
I love that.
Walked off stage. And for the next 10 years, it was a blur to me, like
that is
straight up tunnel vision.
I love that. That's the most beautiful
It was crazy.
thing.
Yeah, like it was.
Now, this is hilarious. You're so humbly talking about not wanting to be a stand-up comedian and being terrified of all that. I did my own Mark DeBonis research when we first started hanging with each other. Mark won Toronto's funniest comedian. How old were you? 16? 17?
No, I wish.
50?
No, it does. There is a no. I think at that time I was 23 or I was turning 24.
I want to know more about. So let me real quick. Mark is hilarious, and the fact that he never wanted to do stand up blows my mind. I think we might have talked a little bit about that before, and it still blows my mind. You're so effortlessly funny, but just it feels like home when you're up there. It's a normal feeling.
It's still, honest to God, I am trying to do anything I can do to get out of stand-up. Like, I don't understand. Like, it does not make sense to me. Like, it's such a weird thing where once I start performing regularly, it makes the most sense. I have a good time. It's the only time I'm like truly like really happy. Like when I'm on stage and everything's mixing and working. But I'm off stage and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? I can't do this. Like, this is not realistic. I'm like, I need to open up a restaurant or start a podcast. I'm like, I'm trying to do anything I can do to get out of stand-up. But it makes the most sense when I do it consistently. Like, I can see the quickest return.
That I find that hilarious. Can you tell us a little bit? Okay, so 23 years old.
Yes.
They have a competition in Toronto. What's the club they had it at?
So it was at Yuck Yucks. It was actually called the Great Canadian Laugh Off. And it used to be worldwide, where comedians from around the world can enter. But I think in the last couple years before I did it, it went to Canada.
Okay.
So it was just for Canada.
That's awesome.
At that time.
I just want to know more. What happened? You won? What was the competition like? What was it?
So what really happened was I got eliminated. So
the come-up stories are the best.
I originally got eliminated from my preliminary round. Okay. And I ended up joining a raffle or a random draw to come back in later on in the competition.
Okay.
And I got back in. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, okay, these are not real judges. These are like radio DJs, and they're not like industry people. I thought to myself, I got to change. I got to come at this with a different perspective. So I did what I thought at the time was more of like rant material, more like, quick laughs, more. And this was, I was like 2-3 years in, which is even crazier. Like I was like not aware of what I was doing, but I had more of like, I always hated that people laughed at how I said things instead of what I said. So I tried to really focus on writing.
Okay.
But I knew that early in the competition, I had to do like more of like a persona act. And it ended up working. I got through the preliminary round, and then I got to the semifinals, and then I got to the finals. And it was 8 people. It happened to be in Toronto that year, or 10 of us, I don't remember. And I was actually on tour out west in Canada. And I was on tour during the week of the finals. And I remember calling the head office of the company, and I was like, look, I think I'm going to leave this tour to do this competition. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm like, why? And they're like, do you think you're actually going to win? And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe, like, because once you're in the finals, you can't go back to the finals. So I'm like, I got one shot.
Yeah.
So I ended up canceling my tour, flew back to Toronto.
That's what you do, man.
And I was like at my parents' house, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like trying to make deals with everybody because I'm losing out on tour money. So I'm like, let's make a deal. Only one person made a deal with me on the whole show. Wow. And I remember just not knowing like none of it seemed real. And I get to the we were there at the show. I'm like walking around. I'm like eating a sandwich. I'm like joking around with everybody because I'm like, this is not real. And one guy came up to me and he's like, I saw your message. I wouldn't make a deal. I think it should be winner takes all. Everyone else was like unavoiding.
Sure.
One guy did make a deal. And then I had my set. It was random draw. I had a prime spot. I went on like 4th or something.
That's perfect.
And I'll honestly tell you, to this day, it was probably one of, specifically on that high pressure environment, like it was, everything worked. Like it was, you write a joke and you have like laugh points in your mind where you want there to be a laugh. And it could not have gone any better for that environment.
That feeling must be unreal.
It was honestly, like I said, it didn't make sense. Like I'm like just performing another show and I was unaware of what was on the line. And because I was just very oblivious to stuff and I try and stay out of the loop. And yeah, like I remember sitting in the green room after and someone walked in on their cell phone and they were like, oh, yeah, you want to make a deal? I'm like, no, we're not making deals now. That's it. You had your chance. That window is closed. And then I ended up winning. It was like 25 grand.
Which
I
was
going
to get into specifics, but I wanted you just to bring it up without me asking about
Yeah, it was Canadian, not American. So it's worth like, what, 12 grand US? But no, it was just very surreal because of how young I was.
Yeah.
Which in any environment will also cause problems now because you get a lot of these older people that were
haters. Yeah, big time.
Yeah. And I was so in my own world, I did not care. Like people were like shit talking me and, you know, not seeing me do well because my jokes are very like long-winded or whatever.
I really think correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of attitude, like the whatever happens, happens, no expectation kind of thing, that breeds the greatest shit. It really does. I watched that video of you and your attitude, the way you perform, your delivery, it's literally like, I say this a lot, but it's aggressively nonchalant in a very positive way. The way you're able to connect and create a relationship like that, that's a skill. That's totally a part of the game.
And that is such a big part of stand-up. And I think about those times of me performing, and I think about now, and it's like I'm constantly trying to go back into that mindset of not knowing or pretending to not know. Because in that first couple years where I've probably accomplished the most I accomplished since then in my career, I had no expectations. I did not care. I didn't know what was going on. And I just performed. I'm just like on stage doing whatever the hell I'm doing. And I had no thought of like, oh, the audience is this or the booker's in the back or this and that. I'm like, I just did not straight up
I'm telling you,
care.
that's what it felt like. It felt like I was having a conversation with a close friend of mine who is hilarious.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's the goal. You meet a lot of people in life, comedians I know, they call it being conversationally funny. Yeah. There's a lot of people that are just conversationally funny.
For sure.
Some of the funniest motherfuckers I've ever met are cutting hair. They're on a construction site.
Yeah.
They're working a truck. You know, they're on a truck.
They can work a room like no other.
Like no other. They have complete command, roasting capabilities through the roof, you know? And then you catch these cats trying to like write and get up on a stage and they lose it. They have no relationship.
Yeah.
The whole goal, I feel like, is how quickly can I make these people want to hang out with me?
Yeah.
You know? I mean, it has a lot to do with a lot of performance-based art, music, you know, comedy, obviously.
Well, I think like I got a lot of theories. Okay, I got a lot of theories on a lot of different things.
Bring them on.
And when you think about it, when I look at what art is, and by the way, this is for another day, but I don't think stand-up is art. It's for a whole other conversation. But I think the art of stand-up is recreating a moment. I think that is really the only art in stand-up. I think unless you're doing a performance piece, it's not art. You're, you know, talking to a certain sense. But what I think the root of all art is I know I'm like backtracking here, is like observation. You take that song Cross City Traffic.
Crosstown Traffic.
Crosstown Traffic.
Jimi Hendrix
song. You can now, he wrote a whole song, I'm assuming, about being stuck in traffic. Okay? But you have music behind it, you have singing, and now it's a song. You take that same premise, Crosstown Traffic, and you have a comedian who's going to now talk about how much they hate being stuck in traffic.
We're talking about like transferring the context of through arts.
The
right?
root is
subject.
observation.
Yeah.
So observation is the way to relate. Now, if you want to relate on a mass level, you talk about the quote unquote hack subjects, relationships, airplanes, all that stuff that everyone can really relate to where you don't have to explain it. And I think that's where the connection is between comedy, music, painting, interpretive dance, which is, you know, whatever the art is, it's somehow connecting, and you do that through observation, right? And if you said, I reminded you of someone, I used to get a lot of people that would say that exact same thing to me. They'd be like, you remind me of like my friend in college or something, you know? And it would bring them in that world where it is...
Well, it's the
relatable.
It's okay. You took the word out of my mouth. It's literally the relatability. This is the things that connect people, right?
Yeah.
It's if I watch a Kardashian, someone famous on TV, right? From my home and the comfortability of my own area, I could watch that, enjoy it, and take it for what it's worth, right? But it has nothing to do with me. It's the furthest from my life and how I want to live it.
It's a fantasy.
It's a fantasy, right?
Because you might want that life, or like not you, but like someone watching it might want to be a Kardashian. Someone watching it might want to have that luxury to not have to care about anything. And, you know.
But when someone says, "Hey, you know when you're getting a blowjob and some girl's nipples just lightly rub on your thigh," I can feel that.
Yeah.
I can feel that.
That
connects me immediately. Immediately to the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a terrible example, but it's also just very real, right? Now
so
I can have a conversation about that.
You're
you know?
instantly now laughing.
Without
The second that someone says, even before that, the second they start that sentence, you're brought into a different zone.
Not only have, hopefully, you've experienced that, so you know what it feels like.
Yeah.
Number two, it's just funny. It's conversationally funny to hear someone out of the comfort zone mention that.
So now here's, as a comedian, where I'm going to now drop the hammer. What's the joke now? Because this is where I see a lot of comedy where people will say something that will get a laugh or a response, but at the end of the day, what's the joke?
Well, the joke is that you like the nipple touching your thigh more than the blowjob.
So now you have to create a whole
world. Yeah.
And this is where I feel like you can talk about whatever you want as long as there's a joke. It doesn't have to be funny, but there has to be an attempt. Like, ideally you want it to be funny.
Yeah.
But if you just say that scenario and then move on, maybe you're going to laugh, and you as an audience member might not even click in.
That's fucking hilarious, actually.
And it's like, it might not even click into you that there was no joke. But as a comedian, and I've seen it happen thousands of times, and I probably do it 1,000 times all the time, it's like, where's the joke? You've now created a scene.
Yeah.
And you as the audience member are in that world. If you just now focus on that scene.
Like, you'll get the laugh.
The initial laugh,
right?
yes.
You'll get that, but now there's 40 minutes now. Like,
what's next?
What's happening now? Where is this world of blowjob, nipple, thigh touching?
Yeah,
What is that world?
What is that doing? Like, because you can get into like, what is it doing to your body? Like, is it like you can really get deep in it, and that's to me where, like, what a joke is, and a lot of people won't be comfortable with 90% of the audience not laughing because maybe you and your friends are laughing in the corner.
Yeah.
And the comic is looking at the rest of the crowd being like, no one else is laughing, and then they move on. But if they took the time to really, because I think what a joke is really just giving someone directions. So if you're from a city and we're both from the city, you can say, hey, go down 3 blocks. You'll see the bridge, turn right. My house is on the left. That is like a very dumbed down version of directions, but we both are from the same city. We know the route, and you can give that. But if I've never been here, like I just moved to Buffalo, and you're giving me directions, you need to be very specific. You need to say, hey, man, you got to go down 3 blocks. You're going to pass 6th Street. On 7th Street, you got to turn left. It's going to be a one-way. Because I might get to the same destination, but I need way more details.
For sure.
And that's the difference between like conversationally funny and stage funny in a club and in an alternative environment.
And the best comedians seamlessly mold the two, where they have this premise, they have the idea in their head, they have the joke off rip, then they have the world that exists within that joke, but they can talk to you like they've been talking about it with you for years. Since we were kids, we've been talking about this blowjob and the nipples on my thighs, right?
Yeah,
This is normal, right? This whole world we live in, blah, blah, blah.